Well, I'd like to welcome up our affiliates and prospective affiliates for our first ever affiliate panel. This is very exciting for us. We've been growing and we finally have people to share information about what it's like to set up an Apprenti program in another place besides Washington. And also for those people who are considering becoming affiliates, what are they considering? And what do they need to figure out in order to establish an apprenticeship in their community through Apprenti? So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself first, and then I'll start with questions. So Terry, you can introduce yourself first. Or sorry, Sandy. Okay. I looked at Terry. I looked at Sandy and I said Terry.
It's even more confusing to me because that's my sister's name. I'm like, what? Huh? How do you know that here? I'm Sandy Hoff, and I'm with the Nashville Technology Council.
I'm Terry Hockett. I'm with the Technology Association of Oregon.
Jessica McCormick with Lane Workforce Partnership in Oregon.
And I'm Kathleen Barton with the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce.
I'm David Palmer with the Workforce Intelligence Network for Southeastern Michigan.
Great. And you guys will need to use your mics just because we're using the video. So make sure, Jen will bring you another mic. So my first question is, why is there a need for a tech apprenticeship in your community? And what do you hear from employers about their workforce needs? And let's start with David.
So let's see, I want to say in 2016 we had approximately 90,000 IT job postings in our region. The region that I'm talking about is essentially Detroit's labor shed. So the lower corner of the mitten around Detroit is that general area. I won't bore you with counties. So those 90,000 postings, we had about 3,700 graduates from all levels of post-secondary. So you can see the tremendous gap just right off the board. And in a situation where we're blessed to be in a time right now nationally where we're essentially at full employment, the question becomes, where do you find humans to do the things that you desire and to be productive? So as auto and IT have become essentially a merged occupation sector, the development of autonomous cars and all that sort of fun stuff. You know, we have, the big kids like General Motors and Ford and Chrysler sitting next to the Quicken Loans and all of the local healthcare systems and the behemoth University of Michigan and all the folks that they employ. So where do we find the humans? And what I mentioned earlier is, I think, shifting the supply curve of talent by acquiring people that are perhaps underutilizing their skills in other sectors to come into the table is apprenticeship seemed like a logical way to do that. We'd been relatively successful capturing funding from the U.S. Department of Labor in the previous years to help stand up apprenticeship networks in our state and other things. And you scratch your head a little bit, well, standing up apprenticeship networks in Detroit, well, the skilled trades folks have been doing this for about 100 years. And when we brought IT apprenticeships to them, they're like, well, why do we need that? I'm like, well, because these are all actual occupations that can work within that function. So, yeah, it's given a lot of benefit right out of the gate, just changing the conversation.
Great. Kathleen, you are a prospective affiliate, so you can give your perspective on why is there a need for tech apprenticeship in your community and what do you hear from employers?
Thanks. So back in 2015, the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce started doing work with the idea of sector strategies. They'd been doing some work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and decided they were going to really try to approach their client organizations and their members to address key issues that they had and develop the sector strategies. No surprise to anybody around the room, the biggest issue across all of the sector strategies was talent. And we have sector strategies in areas of construction, healthcare, financial services, risk management, and compliance. And then one of the areas that emerged across all of those was actually not just IT, but cybersecurity in particular. And Arizona is actually starting to think of itself as a hub for cybersecurity talent. We have some unique demand and some unique capabilities in that area. So we developed an industry-led cybersecurity sector strategy with the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce. And we currently have about 7,000 open jobs in just the Greater Phoenix area, not just Arizona, in cybersecurity talent. And although the Chamber works primarily in the Greater Phoenix, Maricopa County area, we actually have members that are statewide. So we're building it intensively, very locally, but thinking about this as a statewide initiative. It was a very painful process, but the companies from healthcare, from banking and financial services, cybersecurity companies, manufacturing companies, and others took a number of months to actually develop a pathway of cybersecurity analysts, identified the skills and capabilities as well as the related certifications in those areas, and then very quickly decided that they wanted to make sure that the education and training providers were as closely as possibly aligned to the skills and capabilities that they had identified. No small task, and we took on a number of activities, including looking at our 2-year program in cybersecurity to make sure that it was really closely aligned. But the reality was, and what the companies are saying, is the biggest pain level, no surprise, is around mid-tier talent. They figured that they have a lock on some of the entry level. We really don't, but they think that's a lot easier than the mid-tier talent. So the issue was the mid-tier jobs that were the toughest, and looking then at that combination, the desire not just of skills and capabilities and certifications, but also the hands-on experience, the understanding of what it means to be in a business and the business of cybersecurity, along with some level of experience that allowed them to have also developed the soft skills, right? The communication skills, problem-solving, teamwork, all of the things that we've talked about today. So the combination of the demand that we have for the talent, a rapid time to talent model that combines both education and training as well as the hands-on experience is really what made us very excited when we came upon Jennifer, I guess it was last May in Washington, and learned about Apprenti.
Jessica, tell us about Eugene.
So yeah, the area I serve is Lane County, Eugene, Springfield, and then, you know, when you compare our region to Detroit or Phoenix, the entire county is rural. But in our region, we have a quickly growing tech sector. We're forecasted to grow by 28% over the next 10 years. And as of today, we have 370 tech occupation openings in Lane County. Through our sector strategy work, Lane Workforce Partnership and the Technology Association brought together our tech industry, and workforce was a big issue. Not only being able to fill the jobs, but the curriculum at the university and the community college level, it wasn't meeting the needs of the local workforce, so they were still having to train folks once they got to job. So, you know, we brought industry and the colleges together, and they've been, you know, making great strides. But even with changing the curriculum and having that industry connection, they're only producing, you know, 50 graduates a year, and it's just not enough to meet the workforce needs. So that's where apprenticeship, you know, it creates an additional pathway for folks who don't want to go that traditional education route.
Terry.
So we had a convergence of several different things. First off, when I started with the Technology Association of Oregon in Central Oregon, meeting with the companies, they said we need to get more women in the pipeline and minorities and keep the ones that we have. So that was kind of my first edict into really growing the pipeline. As the year closed and we started saying, how many companies do you, or what's your employment look like for 2018? We have 127 tech companies in Central Oregon. They have over 500 job openings. That's a lot just for tech. We have 8 graduating seniors. So the OSU Cascades did a phenomenal job. They're 100% employment for their seniors, almost 100% employment for their juniors. Doesn't begin to touch the problem of 500 job openings. So we definitely had a need, and it was coming into Denver, hearing about the program, saying we're getting on board. So we've presented our own set of challenges to Apprenti because we're small. We have under 100,000 people in pretty much one central location, and it's remote. Now, granted, it's one of the most beautiful places to be, but it's a predominantly white male retiree city, or has been, but it's rapidly changing. There's over 200 companies in January filed business licenses. So we are on a growth path that's astronomical, and we can't keep up. So that's pretty much in a nutshell why we need Apprenti.
Tell us about Nashville.
Okay. I feel very at home here in Seattle with all of the cranes and construction going on. It's very much like Nashville. We have over 100 people a day are moving to Nashville, and our companies are growing like crazy. Of course, just like every other community, the one thing that we heard from our membership was that they didn't have enough access to talent. So in looking at all the job descriptions, and all the job descriptions said that they wanted a computer science degree, we started out going out and saying, we got to get more kids into computer science programs. So we started our workforce development journey really focusing on the K through 12 area, and soon realized that it was going to take a really long time to get that third grader that's in a code camp into a job. So although we're still doing that, we realized that there was more to this that we needed to explore. And that's when we really started getting focused on the apprenticeship model and trying to figure out how do we add another piece to the puzzle, not to replace anything that we're going on that we already have going on, but how do we just do more, do different.
And you're a prospective affiliate as well. So when you were thinking about what to do to solve the problem, why were you looking at Apprenti as a potential solution?
When we first started talking to Apprenti a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago maybe, I don't know, time gets distorted, but it's been a while. And so we've kind of gone back and forth and really trying to decide what makes the most sense for Nashville. Because initially, in talking to our employers, the very first thing that we heard is, but we're not Seattle, right? We're an enterprise-based tech ecosystem. We're more IT departments than tech companies for sure. We don't have an Amazon. We don't have a Microsoft. How are we going to make this work here? But in going through and really looking at what Apprenti had to offer, not only was it so easily tailored to what we were doing in Nashville, but all of the pieces were actually there. As we had our members coming to us and saying, but we can build you a portal, but we can do this, we can do that. We're like, yeah, maybe, but do you have it ready for us tomorrow? And do you have all of the contracts and all of the other documents that are already in place that we can take, and maybe we need to tweak them a little bit, but we can start there instead of starting from scratch. And so for us, it's been, they can all attest to a long journey in trying to sort this all out and figure it out. But I really feel like it's been, for us, we've really stopped and reevaluated many times along the way and really felt like this was the best decision that we could make to not start from scratch.
Mm-hmm. And so David, Terry, and Jessica, our team has come down and trained you on the Apprenti model. For Oregon, we've trained you everywhere, everything from standards and running an apprenticeship committee to interviewing and screening candidates. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like for you and what the model offers that really helps you get the program going in your communities?
Everybody's looking at me, so I guess I'll go. Let's see. So I appreciate the scalability of the concept. So we've had IT tech cluster work that we've been doing in the region for a long time, and we've been sort of working with the boot camp methodologies of getting people up to speed in 12 or 6 or 14 weeks or whatever the flavor of the week is for how long they stay in the boot camp. And we found that the end result of that is once the human was on staff, they still took 6 to 8 months before they're even close to becoming useful within the organization. So so that's at $8,000 a head for a boot camp at one of the well-known providers in downtown Detroit. So we brought that in-house and said, all right, if the really smart people at an organization called Title Source, which handles titles for the Quicken Loans empire, they designed a system in-house, and we took that system and put people through and essentially got the same result versus paying $8,000 per head. And that still got us to the point where, all right, great, now they're ready for 6 to 8 months of internal training. So the argument that I've been making is that, you know, these off-the-shelf solutions allow us to take it to scale much more quickly. So if we have tens of thousands of opportunities throughout the region in auto, financial services, and straight IT, and other research and development areas, then why not take what has already been demonstrated as viable here by well-named actors that are in this room, and take that to, you know, other industries that have essentially the same needs. So I like the fact that I can, when we just got the portal turned on, and I think we'll begin recruiting to the portal eminently within the next few weeks, I hope. And we're going to launch in the Ann Arbor area, I believe, where we're going to say small and medium-sized tech companies in Ann Arbor that really struggled to compete against the Detroit marketplace to get talent to come there, even though it's only 30 miles. Can we look at taking the talent that's already ingrained in Ann Arbor, you know, all those master's degree students that enjoy working at Starbucks, you know, God bless them, but if you'd like to do something else other than work at Starbucks in downtown Ann Arbor or another name brand that we all know and love, how do you get on that pathway? Because even in some of the initial emails that have been circulated among partners saying, hey, this is something that we're working on, they forward it to somebody they know that has been interested in tech, and I get these calls from people randomly, like, I can't afford to do a master's degree, another master's degree in computer science, but that's really what I want to do. When can I sign up in the portal? So yeah, as was said, taking all this stuff off the shelf and rolling with it, you know, at least clears the initial admin barrier, and then the real work starts in developing the relationships over time with the companies that don't have another, you know, onboarding mechanism to find more humans, but they also have institutional resistance via HR or via the C-suite to looking at alternative credentials because it's not something that they're comfortable with yet, and that's the process that we're going through.
So from our perspective, we were initially looking at a $1.2 million budget over 3 years to stand up a tech apprenticeship program. That got slashed to about $350,000. So there was no way that we were going to be able to develop a tech apprenticeship program with that amount of money in any sort of quality or in a timely manner. So finding the Apprenti program has been amazing for us. I know we've been talking with you guys since February, I think, of last year, and really just been trying to figure out how to make it work in the Eugene market. And you know, we don't have large tech employers that can take more than one apprentice at a time. So being able to figure out how to adapt the training, the pre-training portion of the apprenticeship to have 10 different employers with 3 different occupations, and trying to make that work in a way that that uses the small amount of money that we do have access to for pre-training. And you know, as with standing up any workforce development program, you know, you have hurdles along the way, and with the Apprenti program, we're able to, every time we come up against a hurdle, there's an expert to call who's already done this before, and they've already had this dilemma and can help us work through it. So we're really fortunate to have that and, you know, have their expertise.
So what I loved about it was the plug and play option. And I know that kind of sounds, when you actually get into it, it's not as realistic as it sounds. There's a lot to it, but there's a lot of moving components. And the first time you run anything, whether you're running it from scratch and trying to build it yourself, this is so much further down the road, and it has the blessing of DOL. It talked about the inclusion and diversity issues that we were having. For example, you know, we opened up our apprenticeship, the drive, and we had 385 applicants in Bend, predominantly in Oregon. 173 of those ranked. 36 of those were women, which I was a little appalled about, but I'm working on that one. 56 were vets, and 86 were minorities. Over half were minorities in Bend, which I thought was really impressive. So it works. It says what it, you know, when I went to the community partners and I said I can help make Bend more inclusive, which is one of the initiatives that we have in Bend, is to be one of the most inclusive cities. We have a long way to go. And this program is giving us the hardcore numbers that we can do this. And it's just drawing in the right people and getting the message out there. So, and Matt and Jordan coming down and doing their community talks, and they've met with all of my hiring partners, and we couldn't do it without the partners in the room. So East Cascade Works, who has been our investment board, they're the ones finding the couch cushion monies to make this happen. And so it can happen if you don't have big grants. It would be a whole lot nicer if we did, but we're going to make it work, and we're going to prove the concept. So it's just going to be a little bit more of a struggle.
So I'll let you continue on a little bit and tell me about how your organization or how your collaborative is funding the program to get it started. What kinds of funds were you able to tap into?
So as I said, East Cascade Works, we couldn't do it without them. They had $50,000 in sector fund money, and then they had another $100,000 through WIOA funds, which were, I believe, DOL have some. So with that, we know we can put in a cohort of 10 at a minimum. We are hoping to scratch out a few more dollars around and get 12 to 15 in our first cohort. We're hoping that once the first cohort goes through, that the companies and the community will start to see the value of it. We have Governor Brown coming down on the 18th, and we're going to, give her a show about what we're doing and bringing in the hiring partners, the community partners, as well as a couple of apprenticeship applicants to talk with her, with the media there. So we're really trying to showcase that it is a viable program and that we need additional funding for it.
Great. Sandy, how do you plan to fund this in Nashville?
So far, we have just over $250,000 in corporate investment. We just met with our Workforce Investment Board, who is going to put forth a grant proposal to the State Department of Labor for $500,000. In addition, we're working to kind of piece together training funds through WIOA, through the GI Bill, and other opportunities there. And we're working we have 2 proposals that we've submitted to our local foundations. And so we're kind of piecing it all together, trying to find as many funding opportunities that we can that have less restrictions to them. The more line item restrictions that you have, the more difficult it becomes. So we're trying to go that route. But that being said, there's not a dollar that we would turn down.
Jessica?
So our project is funded through the Oregon Employment Department. They received the AAI grant from the Department of Labor. Initially, they received that grant for advanced manufacturing, and we had submitted a grant with them in partnership, but that wasn't funded. And their efforts in the manufacturing community in Oregon haven't been as successful as they had hoped. So they actually approached us and said, hey, we are thinking about modifying our grant with the Department of Labor, and we would like to know if you want to pilot tech apprenticeship for the state of Oregon in Lane County. So of course, we're on board, but that's where the funding was significantly lower than we had hoped for. So in addition to the funding that we have to pilot the program, we have access to training dollars through that grant. They're sort of first come, first serve, so, and it's shared with the other advanced manufacturing, and of course Bend has access to those training dollars as well. But it's not the $15,000 per person, so we're having to get really creative with our training and how we use the funds and combining occupations when trainings overlap, and we're getting just really scrappy with our money.
Kathleen, what's the plan for Phoenix?
So we were not a recipient of an AAI grant, and one of the things that I was excited to come here about today was to listen to how other people who are also not are figuring out how they fund this work. So, we're going to do a lot of different things. And perhaps a little bit different than the model that Apprenti was able to use here in Washington. We're going to look at some industry funds for this, and beyond, I think, just industry philanthropic funds. So I think our model will more than likely have an industry hire pay to play on this. And when we've tested this out a little bit with some of the companies that we've talked to, they're really, really interested and very excited about the model. That, you know, the pain level is high enough, and when the pain level for talent gets high enough, companies are willing to do a whole bunch of things that they have not done in the past. So that's a really good thing, and it works in our favor right now. So we'll look for a model that provides some type of philanthropic funding from the business communities. The Chamber is also in partnership with the Arizona Technology Council. I chair the Workforce and Education Committee for that statewide organization. So we'll look at the membership across those groups for some funding. We will also probably look at a higher pay to play for the companies on the front end to help offload the training costs. And then we will look for philanthropic dollars. We will look at our WIOA dollars. Our governor has just appointed a cybersecurity team in Arizona. The person who heads that also is one of the co-chairs of our cybersecurity sector strategy. So we're hoping that where there's a desire to put together a team, and they have identified a couple of key areas of focus, workforce is one, and they've asked the Chamber to lead that work. We're hopeful there might be some dollars from that. And I think one of the other things that we're going to need to look at also, honestly, in the model, and we may start with this not at the get-go, but I think we're also going to need to take a look at getting creative in who the providers of the training are. We have a very, very extensive community college district that has about 190,000 students. I think it's the second largest in the country, and 10 colleges across the valley. So even though that might not be the ideal partner on the front end, nor do we know that they can deliver the training in the time frame we need, we might start to look at how do we also lower the cost of the training as well. That won't be what we do out of the box, but I think it's got to be in our mind in terms of how do we think about some potentially lower cost models. So I think it sounds like we're throwing everything in but the kitchen sink, and that's probably what we'll do.
So from WIN's perspective, WIN, for context, is a collaboration of the 10 community colleges and the 6 workforce investment boards across those 16 counties in greater southeastern Michigan. So from WIN's origin, we're looking at data in the labor market, tracking the real-time job postings via Burning Glass, which was mentioned earlier, into occupational clusters rather than industry clusters, because you need IT folks in energy, healthcare, et cetera. You need accountants across the span. So that's sort of the baseline that brought us to apprenticeships as being one of the ways to, again, shift that supply curve. So we started, our AAI grant is based in standing up the apprenticeship ecosystem. So we have apprenticeship coordinators at community colleges that are reaching out to businesses across the community saying that this is an alternative pathway for you to look at adjusting for your talent needs. So we have about 25 people on staff, about 7 in our research area, and a number of us working in different program areas. So we've developed reasonably decent working relationships with a whole bunch of different potential funders. This hasn't been announced publicly yet, so you're among the first to know. We worked with the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation in Detroit, who's active in Detroit and Buffalo, and were awarded $1.5 million from them to stand up training of the first 100 apprentices. So the Wilson Foundation has a particular interest in a very short timeline to spend their resources over a 20-year period, which we're 3 years into now, to say that they're willing to gamble on what looks like a high investment, high reward opportunity. So we can pay for the $15,000 in training for the first 100 people, and because we're so closely embedded with the workforce investment boards, I believe that we can take the braided funding approaches that we've used in so many other areas to extend that out to maybe up to 150 people. So we've got pots of dollars sitting on the shelf from the Michigan National Guard, who's very interested in the cybersecurity work. You know, we were the first state in the country to have a public cyber range where you could start doing testing of commercially viability in a closed network situation that traditionally is only available under the DoD umbrella. So we have all of these different assets, along with these crazy things called autonomous cars that are coming soon and are on the roads in some of our communities already. So the talent needs in auto and related supply chains. So I think there's something like 348 research and development firms from around the world that are based in the Metro Detroit region that are all working on these things simultaneously. And with the American Center for Mobility coming online for validation, there's even more and more emphasis putting on, where is the talent supply coming from? So the Wilson Foundation came to the table, our workforce system has come to the table, our community colleges are going to be our training provider of first choice through the workforce side of the house, not the credit side. So if the workforce side of the house can't respond in the way that we would need to with the custom training plan that we're working with the employers to develop, then we go to the private market or any other number of resources. So there's a number of different foundations in the community that I think hear the ROI statements that Jennifer and Karen and Jordan and the team have developed and say, all right, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense on paper. Now let's get in front of the decision makers at these organizations, and that's moving about as slow as molasses. The Detroit region has a particularly interesting sociological makeup in that we don't necessarily trust folks that quickly. So it can take a year or 2 or 5 or whatever it is to get it to click, but as soon as that switch flips, it's going to start snowballing. So that's why we're starting in Ann Arbor, because I think they're really hungry there. And then use that little chip on the shoulder for the other communities. Well, you didn't start with us first. I'm like, well, we asked. So then we show up and we continue moving the ball. And I think there's a real treasure trove there. So we're paying for our staff that's been working on this for over a year through a Department of Defense Office of Economic Adjustment grant. If your community meets the right criteria, you can go apply to DoD OEA to look at ways to diversify the defense industry areas that you have into other areas if you can show the metrics appropriately. The various apprenticeship grants are on the table, and quite frankly, we use earned revenue from our data and consulting services to help supplement my time sitting here or otherwise, and WTA has been very generous with helping with travel stipends and hotel and these sorts of things that they have access to. So like everybody else on the panel, we just figure out how to make it work, because if nobody else is going to stand up and be the champion for it, then nothing happens. And there's nothing that annoys me more than a whole bunch of plausible deniability arguments as to why you can't get something done. I think we can all get it done if we really, just work at it long enough and hard enough.
So we're definitely in that proof of concept stage, and we're further along here in Washington State, and some of our employers are starting to pay more contribute more towards the training costs. All the funders in the room probably want to know, what are the prospects for sustainability once the program is going in your community? How do you plan to sustain it? What do you see happening? Sandy?
I don't think it's anything really all that different than what Jennifer just showed not that long ago, right? That once you hit that 100 apprentice mark, which will take, we think, 18 months to 2 years to get there, then with the administrative fee being paid, that will help us to be able to continue to run the program. Once we've been able to successfully place apprentices, we have 15 employers that have committed to being a part of this program. Every single one of those employers have said, after we have a successful experience, we'll pay for the training cost. It's no more than what we're, as referenced earlier, the placement fee that we're paying to recruiters now, the lowered salary for that initial first year. Between those two things, it's not an issue to pay for the training costs. We just want to make sure that this works.
And ours is going to be proof in the pudding. We do a lot of hand-holding in Bend because there's not a lot of us, so we can do this. There's a lot of high touch. There's a couple people that said, companies that were interested in the beginning, the CEO said yes. CTO had a little bit of the pedigree problem. And so they're pulling out and sitting back on the sidelines. I had another one that does their training in-house. But I wanted them on board. So we don't have a whole lot of businesses in the 30 to 50 mark, which is really the sweet spot of where Bend needs to be able to sustain an Apprenti program. So I really wanted to go after them. I invited them to be part of our steering committee. And after the second meeting of our steering committee, they said, how do we sign up? So they want to change their program up and run somebody through Apprenti and test it out that way. So it is a little bit more hand-holding in the beginning, but I think, again, as they get more involved in the process, they start to see your training vendors and the program and the standards, it sells itself. And then it's just a matter of going after the funding, and that's just like everything else. I work for TAO, and I'm fundraising all the time. I mean, it's a nonprofit, so it's sponsorship and membership, and this is just one more piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I'll just have to echo that. You know, the placement fee is really going to help programmatically. Allison and myself continue the work. It's the training dollars that are really the tricky part, and after we don't have access to those grant funds anymore, you know, that'll have to be a conversation with employers on, you know, if they see value in the program and what they're willing to contribute towards that.
And I would agree with the vast majority of that. I do think that that the proof is in the pudding, and that when the companies see the value on this, the cost versus the lost opportunity cost for how long positions go unfilled will address a lot of that. That having been said, I think that we'll still look at some ways to try to drive that training cost down and maybe try a couple of pilots. As I said, we do have a pretty creative community college district that's going through a big transformation process right now, including better serving companies and better serving its students. So I think this could be right up that alley, and I'd like to push the envelope on that. I also think, again, you know, in 30 plus years at Intel, and working with a lot of different companies, and when I was an exec on loan, I really do believe that when the pain level is high enough, companies are willing to look at different things. And so I think once they start to really break the idea that you have to have a 4-year degree for this type of work, I think then they're going to be open to a number of other things. I mean, right now they're saying, you know, just find me somebody who's got these soft skills. I know how to get them the training. You know, they can send them to CompTIA or wherever they're going to send them. So I think we'll be able to take a look at some of those students who do have 2-year degrees in non-technical fields but have those other skills. I think we'll be able to look at some of the 4-year degrees that are also non-tech. We'll take a look at an incredibly large population of individuals who have some post-secondary education and try to go after that. So I just think that it opens us up to looking at a wider population and maybe still an apprenticeship model. You know, the article that Noel Ginsberg wrote about the need for apprenticeships, a number of you have probably seen that article. I think looking at models that go back to tacking that into some of the traditional education so that employers aren't saying, well, it doesn't matter if you come out with a CS degree, it still takes me a year to bring you up to speed. So I'm actually excited about the opportunity. I think Apprenti and the model is going to open us up for a lot of different and very, very exciting things. We also are looking still at the CareerWise Colorado model at the high school level. We're also part of the Pathways to Prosperity Network out of Harvard and the Graduate School of Education and Jobs for the Future, and we are starting a program with using dual and concurrent enrollment at the high school level. So we're going at talent from a lot of different levels. Now that'll still get you to the entry level versus mid-tier, but I think we've got a multi-pronged strategy, and I think Apprenti is going to be the key to helping us get to that tipping point or inflection point on a lot of new things, and I'm jazzed, so we'll figure out where we get the money from.
Yeah, ditto my colleagues', you know, discussion around the placement fees. I think that there's a lot of staffing agencies that are intermediaries for the auto industry especially. You don't get direct hire into Chrysler on a lot of cases. You go through any number of different providers. So we've been having conversations with staffing agencies who need to keep a bench stacked with folks that are readily deployable to new projects, and they're going to take them on as incumbents regardless of if they're placed or not, because they know that there's probably only going to be a week or two where they have to assign them to another project. So I think there's avenues that way, and the model of, you know, being the holding company for the talent while waiting to go FTE, I think is a good one. And I think also a website we just launched called miapprenticeships.org. We took the DOL system of apprenticeship registration and process mapped it with our state's manufacturing education partner from NIST. And we took 247 steps and boiled it down to 10. And the ROI calculator that we built in for multiple different industries there shows that again and again and again, it's that 12 to 15,000 to get the folks trained. So regardless of the industry, I think a part of the sustainability play is that the tech industry is moving at light speed constantly and is always shifting. So like our apprentices that were up here earlier, you know, you're screening for interest and aptitude and a real desire to learn all the time. And that shows itself in dollar signs and productivity to the employers. So we can figure out how to pay the staff to do stuff that if it's not completely supplemented through earned revenue, because I think it's demonstrated value in the workforce system is going to be pretty tremendous.
Can I just add real quick to what Kathleen just said about her comment about the employer saying, if you give me somebody with the soft skills, I can do the rest. To me, that was the most compelling argument going to our employers, because if I only had $1 for every time an employer said that to me, and it was so great to be able to go back to them and say, hey, remember how you said that?
Yep.
Well, guess what? We got something. We got something. You've told me 100 times that this is what you want. We've got a program that we can do just that. And when we said that, it was really hard for them to say anything but, okay, we'll give that a try, right? I mean, we kind of did what you asked us to do. So.
Yeah, I want to add on that, you know, the companies have said over and over, it's skills, not education. We'll hire the right person, but we don't care if they have the skills. But the very mechanism that they use to screen candidates completely contradicts that, right? So they're asking for degrees, even through this process where we're asking for job descriptions and talking about the pre-training. They're like, well, we need someone who has a 4-year degree in this. And we're like, okay, this is an apprenticeship program. If, you know, that's not what this is about. So that's the great thing about, you know, Apprenti provides the mechanism for getting those people in front of these employers. You don't get a Roscoe through your traditional hiring path, and he seems awesome. So.
Yeah, and ultimately, that's what I was trying to drive at earlier, is, you know, in our region, 90% of the IT jobs require a BA. And Jordan and I were respectfully, you know, giving exchange back and forth over that, and Jordan saying, well, that's the ideal candidate. I'm like, well, I call BS on that, because I don't know if that is the ideal candidate. Because I've got CIOs of giant organizations saying, I don't give 2 squats about the certs coming in. I need interest, aptitude, and ability to do the things that I need them to do. And if that's the case, then I think there needs to be a better degree of honesty and transparency in the way that we're recruiting. And that if this provides a pressure relief or an excuse to be able to improve the buffet of options that are available in the human resource information system that ends up filtering out the Roscoes of the world or any of the other anecdotes that we can prove with just the 100 or so people that have gone through Apprenti, then I say that is a win on its own that can't necessarily be quantified in dollars easily, but will ultimately, again, shift the supply curve of talent so that we're actually going for the people that give 2 squats about what they're doing and are super passionate about it. And at the same time, respecting that somebody out of Carnegie Mellon or the University of Michigan or MIT or the usual suspects of recruitment shops have specialized skills, but ultimately don't know how to work when they show up 9 times out of 10. You've still got to go through a different type of mentorship and apprenticeship internally without the DOL cert that's portable.
Great, that's really good info. Does anybody have any hiring partner stories they want to share or descriptions about conversations with hiring partners that would be helpful to kind of paint the picture of what it's like to get them on board and how easy or hard it is?
So I'll start. So we've been talking with hiring partners since June. We had sort of a soft launch. We thought we were ready, but we weren't ready. And I think we disclosed too much up front. I think we scared them. You know, we talked about the placement fee, and we talked about the MOU and the pre-training, and you know, this and that and the other, and it was overwhelming for them. So after that soft launch, we just started having like one-on-one conversations. And we didn't talk about the placement fee at all. That for them, I don't know why, it was just something that scared them away. And once we demonstrated the value to them as a company, and we sent the MOU over, that's where we talked about the placement fee. We explained what it was, all of the work that that we put into it. That in your traditional trades apprenticeship falls on the shoulders of an employer. that's where we got them. And it took a really long time to get people to say yes. They were supportive of the program. It actually took the governor coming to Eugene to talk about apprenticeships, and all of a sudden, we had 3 hiring partners sign on the dotted line, and then 2 more followed, and then another 2 followed. It's really been a nice snowball effect, but you know, I don't know if it was just the publicity. They all had bought into the program. It just, it took a really long time, a lot of work, a lot of conversations.
Yeah, I would add to that too. So governors certainly have that effect on a lot of people. But I think the other thing too is for us, and Jennifer and I have been talking about this, I think we're going to, Skype or Zoom in some of the business leaders, the hiring managers, because companies are influenced by other companies like them. So I'm looking for those sweet spots. I was having a conversation with the gentleman who was here from Accenture and talking about Accenture in Phoenix, and also about connection to other partners that they're working with that are in the greater Phoenix area. So once they start to see others seriously ready to step into the water, they'll move. And so it's a kind of a peer influence, peer competitiveness, and okay, if they can do it, so can I. So I think that that's really important. We also brought Jennifer into Arizona in September, had her meet at 3 meetings. We kept her really busy. But then we did some follow-up meetings one-on-one with companies. Jennifer was in on the vast majority by phone to go through it again. We didn't get through all of we didn't intentionally go through all of the detail, but we gave them enough time to ask some questions. So as a result, we've got about 10 companies that are really pretty interested. They're not signed on the bottom line yet, so we've still got to work on that. And part of that's the funding piece. We have to come to them with a bottom line funding model, but I think giving them the time to kind of think about it, ask questions about it, not scare them away with all of the details that actually make it work, are some good pointers for other people as well.
And it's kind of mixed. For us, it was, we were a little too deep in the process, and that scared them away. And so once we backed off the process, and then they were watching from the sideline, and now they want to know more about the process. So it's, again, building a little bit of rapport. It's consistency. So they're seeing our ads, they're seeing us out there, they're seeing us talk about it over and over. They're sharing among each other, and then all of a sudden now they want to know process. They want to go deep. So it's kind of reading the company as to when they're ready for it. And I think that's kind of like, we got really excited and we went out there and it was too much. So backed off a little bit.
So one of the cluster strategies that we organize is around advanced manufacturing, and there we have GM, Ford, Chrysler, Nissan, Toyota, a whole bunch of tier ones. It took us 2 years just to get them to agree to share the internal intelligence about their training processes to begin filling the gaps around the CAV, connected autonomous vehicle space. So we developed a whole catalog last year of these training classes, and now we're in the second phase of, okay, we got to get through procurement now, we've got to do all this stuff. So Apprenti conversations have followed a bit of a similar track in that, I had one auto OEM say that we're not doing this until somebody you respect is already doing it. We've had another organization that I've been through every level of management, and it pinged back and forth because I think to some extent folks, for whatever reason in our region, hesitate to tip their toe in the water. So that's why we was like, okay, well, that hasn't worked out the way we'd hoped. A lot of people are well informed about this topic, so we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit and make it a competition. So we've got a whole bunch of small and medium-sized IT companies all over the region doing all kinds of fun stuff. And that DoD grant that I mentioned earlier says that DoD's priority for us is to figure out how to get defense contractors integrated into other parts of the economy. So we're doing a two-pronged approach of reaching out to every company that has DoD contracts in our region, and also to these small and medium-sized folks, and we're just going to build a cohort, and I'm hopeful we'll have it up and running by May. Because a lot of folks, look for a little bit of information or money to put a carrot out there, and I've arranged a buffet of nicely roasted vegetables. So we got carrots and parsnips and beets, and everything's right there sitting waiting for them. So it's just a matter of, who wants to take advantage of the buffet while it's open. So from that perspective, we can pay for your training. We can help, move a lot of stuff along, build on institutionalizing the concept, and then from there it'll be, the jealousy effect will kick in, and we'll get, like you said, the snowball rolling, where our governor is also all of a sudden now tuning in to workforce issues. He's in his last year of office, and we have a seat at the table to try to help influence how that distribution of resources could play out. And I think that it's going to be an interesting year for what's coming out of the Detroit market, and novel new ways to try to solve the same old problems.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to questions from people who are here in the room. Jennifer?
I'll say one thing, that if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't come out of the gate talking apprenticeship. I would come out of the gate talking innovative new program to help you find the right people. The word apprenticeship was really off-putting to a lot of people. It felt very blue collar, and they very much identify as creative builders of technology, not, and they just it didn't resonate with them. And so we've kind of stopped initially with employers kind of coming right out of the gate strong with apprenticeship, DOL, registered, government. Those are all words that we say much later in the conversation. We wait to kind of spring that on them. Not spring it on them, but you know what I mean. But we start out with it's just a different tone to the conversation, and I feel like that's really that's changed a lot of the conversations, where they were immediately, I didn't have a hurdle to get over. They were there with me immediately, and then we could kind of build to the more technical pieces of it.
Yeah, our DOL office, their initial reaction was openly hostile to the idea of IT apprenticeships. Like, we've trained this country on how to do apprenticeships in a lot of different ways. Okay, well, pause there, have a cup of coffee, come back in a couple of weeks and talk about it again. So then it slowly evolved to like, okay, these are legitimate occupations that can be worked on in that way. And now they're, strong collaborators and actually openly excited about the opportunity of expanding this into another area. And really the Wilson dollars that are going to be coming in are super, super important, because where we built into that grant that where we can apply wraparound services through the braided funding streams, that's going to allow us to give even a modest stipend to the folks going through. So this concept that a lot of folks with white-collar jobs have, that, well, that person should just figure out how to suck it up and do this for 3 to 5 months, and then they'll have everything they need on the other side, doesn't account for the fact that if it's a choice between keeping the electricity on so that you can run the washer and dryer for the kids, and showing up to a training class so that you can get your 45, 50, or 70,000 job 6 weeks or 5 months from now, there's life that occurs there that I don't think is always fundamentally recognized early in the process. So I think to the extent that folks are having conversations with funders that, life is very real, and ends still need to meet for every human that's going through the program. And even some of the stories from the meeting in Denver, folks had legitimately tear-jerking stories about living in their car prior to going through a program. And if you do want to shift the supply curve of talent, that means you need to diversify not just the look, gender, and approach of the individual, but also the socioeconomic status of the individual. I think is arguably more important to the long-term part of that conversation than adjusting for gender and look, because that socioeconomic status is really a function of access to capital, education, or otherwise. So building that in early into the conversation, I think, was helpful for us, because we set that expectation, and now we will hopefully get some good anecdotes to share back to the crowd.
This has perhaps been the most challenging issue that we've faced, because everybody that we talk to that has money wants to fund that 18 to 24-year-old group, and our employers are saying, we don't want that 18 to 24-year-old group. We want people that have a little more life experience, because we can take somebody that has minimal tech experience but more life experience, or more tech experience and minimal life experience, but the two is kind of a double whammy for us. And so we're not prepared to take an 18-year-old apprentice, initially at least. But it's been hard because everybody that we talk to, in terms of funding, not everybody, but a lot of funders are extremely interested in trying to catch that opportunity youth. And so it's really been for us, it's been a struggle in trying to figure out what to do there.
What we have is a program in Deschutes County that's called Better Together, and it addresses K through 16 as far as education. And so once, and I told them about the program initially, and then they started hearing more about it, because what I did is I went to every community partner, EDCO, Economic Development of Central Oregon, Bend Chamber, City of Bend, just talked about the program, so everybody was kind of talking about it. And then anytime something came up, they were, oh, didn't Terry talk about that program? And so it kind of got a life of its own, which helped it as far as the knowledge. And then as Better Together has an initiative that every junior and senior has an internship before they graduate from high school. And so I'm working with all of the internship coordinators across the county. And so as they are working and show an interest into tech, they can go in and take the test on the site and talk to us, and we say, go take the test and see where you're at, because it tells you what additional skill sets that you may need to bring your test score up. We have them do a test so that it doesn't count, because it will go right out of the system, we know. But it allows us to give a chance to pull the ones in that have that really strong interest in this type of apprenticeship.
I'd offer a comment about that, and I think that the experience that we have is very much the same, and I think one of the things that's exciting about Apprenti is when we talk about the average age being 31 years old, and they think, okay, a little more maturity. But I'll tell you the other piece that I'm excited about, and again, I think Apprenti is going to help us tip a lot of things, which are going to be very exciting for us. But we took, I helped to facilitate a trip to Colorado to take a look at CareerWise Colorado, which is building on the Swiss model of apprenticeships at the high school level. It's still small, it's not really big yet. My colleague from Colorado can tell you a lot more about it, but I will tell you that when the companies went and talked to those apprentices who had been in with other adults, having adult expectations asked of them in the work environment, they were just floored. And, probably most of us around the room had opportunities when we were 16 years old to work in companies. We probably feel like those were some of the best skills that we got in the early days, that we know many individuals that are youth today have not had those same opportunities. So I think once they start to add to the age piece, experience in the field with other adults, with adult and work-related expectations that they rise to the challenge of, I think that's going to start to shift as well. So the first thing is getting, in my mind, is using the Apprenti model to get them really excited about the hands-on work experience and training through the apprenticeship model. And then I think they're going to get equally excited about, okay, boy, if I can do that here, I can also tie that into high school models and some other things. So I think seeing what's possible opens people's eyes to things they haven't thought about before.
So we've been approaching that from the standpoint that for a really long time, the unofficial policy has been go to college and you'll be fine. We don't know necessarily what you're going to do when you're at college. We don't know what kind of job you have when you come out of college, but if you just go to college, it'll be fine, because a good number of the metrics that we have measure success, socioeconomic status and otherwise by college attainment. So in Michigan, we have this thing where there's this real baseline manufacturing that's needed and real skilled trades that are needed that don't require a four-year degree. And because of the well open and obvious economic traumas from a decade or so ago, there created a huge bubble in the system where lots of people were purged and there were no people coming in to replace them as things began to skill up. So we've squeezed the productivity lemon until now it's looking more like a diamond than a lemon, and we need more inputs for young folks. So we said, okay, so what's the career development planning process in the state of Michigan? And, go to college and you'll be fine. Well, okay, that's not working. So we looked at a program called My Bright Future, which we created, built on the CC Inspire platform, which is based on educational development planning, which most states do some version of. So the My Bright Future is basically a module that adds on to the quiz that should you be an attorney or a parking lot attendant or a chemist when you grow up, right? And that takes you to a static web page, which really blows your mind. You can read all about what a chemist does. So what we said is that we need companies to put in their information to say that you can be a chemist at the Great Lakes Water Authority and provide clean water to millions of people in the Detroit region. You can be a chemist at General Motors and do things there, or you could go to any number of different versions. So it starts, I think, with a more sophisticated career development pathway system for youth, which is leading to pre-apprenticeships that we have with nonprofit organizations or work opportunities to some extent. I mean, you go into McDonald's now and you're pretty likely to see the kiosk that you're putting your order into, and the remodel goes from 3 cash registers down to 1. So, I mean, the automation effect is occurring. So while adults have taken a lot of the early career opportunities from students for very real economic need over the past decade or so, there's a large bubble of kids and young adults that just straight up didn't get the work experiences that a lot of us had. In addition, they probably didn't have the same type of career counselor that a lot of us had, because the ratio in Michigan was 705 students to 1 career counselor on average, when it should be around 250 to 1 to be a reasonable case. But I mean, if it's an aggregate, it means a lot of districts don't even have career counselors. So we're rebuilding what's old is new again and making major investments into those career pathway opportunities, which is great. Okay, in 26 years, you'll be ready for the workforce because you've done all the stuff that gets you to where you need to be. So how does that solve the problem that all these employers had yesterday? Well, again, you got to shift the supply curve. If the folks that you have aren't available, then we need to figure out how to reasonably quickly get them repurposed, which is the pathway that Apprenti, paved out for us and said, all right, take it, run, go, good luck.
But David, are your employers interested in hiring kids straight out of school? Or are they looking for a higher level of maturity?
Well, yeah, I mean, in these IT occupations, you've got to have the higher level of maturity. I mean, we heard one anecdotal story about, bringing in the young person who has the inappropriate conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden you've got a social mess on your hands that had you waited 5 or 7 years, maybe that wouldn't have happened. These sorts of things happen in aggregate across the national economy means we're losing tons and tons of money on awkward social moments sometimes. So I think there's always going to be an outlier on either end of the extreme that can demonstrate that it's possible. Is it plausible in aggregate? Probably not. And some group of 17-year-olds that's working on a project now is going to prove us all wrong tomorrow with how successful they're going to be. So the beautiful thing is we're all making it up as we go with the best data that we have available. So part of the wish list that I want to talk with the Apprenti team about when I'm hanging out with them a bit tomorrow is that for the folks that don't pass the aptitude test on first run, I want to be able to overlay those zip codes to the community colleges, to the nonprofits that have quote-unquote pre-apprenticeship programs that are in alignment with the sort of areas where they're seeking improvement. Because one of the things that's been interesting in Detroit is we have this entire buffet of fellowship programs. So we've been recruiting people from all over the country to move to Detroit to make a difference in all kinds of different areas. But there hasn't been a relief valve for the folks that don't make it into the program. So that means the organization has been leaving talent on the table that's willing to bloody relocate from here or wherever to come to the city to work for a couple of years on something that they find meaningful. So I want to make sure that, in our case at least, that we let as few people as possible slip between the cracks. So I want to try to make sure every person who doesn't make the cut, so to speak, has a buffet of resources that they can go to, including referrals to the Workforce Investment Board, where they have retraining dollars on the table to move folks through new opportunities or rejuvenation or however we want to frame it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to figure out as the side benefit of you're aggregating more data about more people and their skills, and how do you use that to benefit the individual and some part of the employment sector.
All right, let's thank our affiliate panel, and we'll have a break.